So let's go through code along 2.1 variables and operators. So for this work, as you've already seen from week 1, I give you an instruction file. I already have that instruction file up. And then I show you how I go over how I'm going to grade it. If you have any questions, ask me about that. But your commits, your code, make sure it's working code. If you have errors, you need to fix them. That's part of how I grade, and that you give me the commit history. And I'll cover this one on the last video. And what I mean by that is if you look, and let's just do this, at the markdown file, you can see there's, and I'll go over all this, but there's a part 1, video 1, part 2, video 2, 3, and then 4. So at the end of 4 will be done, and that's when you'll submit your commit history. Okay, so coming back to the top, what we're going to do first is a setup, and then we'll start coding variables. Okay, so what you're going to do is you're going to take those files we created in your public repo for week 1, the who's and the house. Okay, and you're going to create a folder in your private repo for W2, and then you'll just copy those in there. And as I was setting this up, I thought, you know what happens here is for students who are on CodeSpace, this is not as easy because they can't have both the public and the private repo open. So what I would say to you is that you can just go to GitHub, go to your public repo, go to those files. And you can either, there's a couple ways you can do it here. You could download, but if you download them, you have to then know where to place them. But you could always just copy the content, copy it, create the files in your your private repo, and then go from there. So I just wanted to give you a workaround in case that threw you off. Okay, so here, I'll go ahead and do this step. So in my local setup, I have my base folder open. Again, I'm working locally. So in this case, I know I'm going to work in the private repo. So from here on out, when I say code along, those are all done in your private repo. And so in here, now that I'm in there, remember what I want to grab is these files, right? So the first thing I'm going to do is come up here, and I'm going to create a new folder. Right, so in here, new folder W2. And that W2, I'm just going to grab and I'm going to copy those. Now I'm not going to remove them from here. I'm going to go ahead and come up to here and I'm going to paste them. Okay, so there we go. Okay, so now they're untracked because in this repo they haven't been there before as they have down in the public one. Okay. Okay, so we did that, and then I want you to just add this style, not necessarily that we need it now, and I give you a comment here, you don't have to include it. So in this case, let's just open in our private repo the style.css, right, and then put that container. Now we're going to grow this, especially next week. Actually, we're going to spend, I think, all next week's attendance just on some code we're going to put in our HTML and CSS. Okay. So now we do our get workflow, right? So in this case, for this particular video, actually the link for the video should go up higher. Now that I'm doing it, I realized it, but not a big deal. Okay, I'm going to go here, right? Now I've shown a couple ways to get into here, right? So if I wanted to right click, open an integrated terminal, it changes my terminal to that. And I could do pwd to show that current folder that I am in. And I could also just do, if I do back, we'll go back 1. I could go forward 1 by typing in -pri, and it would do that as well. Oh, I'm already in it. Okay, so let's see, pwd, where am I? Oh yeah, I'm in the week 2, that's why. Because if I went back 1, it just went to the private. Okay, so now learning to navigate both what's in the Explorer and what's in the terminal is an important thing you'll learn as we continue. So let's go ahead now and do the setup, right? So let's see, did I have you do anything else? Nope, that was it just for the setup. Oh, but one thing I do like to do, and I generally recommend, is I would do week 2.1, okay? So just because that way I can see which one I'm working on. Okay, so now I'm going to come here, and this is where get status. Okay, good. Get add star. Okay, now I know I didn't even talk about the U, so hopefully you're getting used to that it was untracked. Right now it's indexed added because it's added to the staging area. Commit. And what did I want? Set up for week 2 done. Okay. Now at this point, I don't have to do a get push yet because I'm not submitting anything. I'm just doing the first commit for really this one here. So I'll move this video link up above before you see it. All right, so now that we've created that, so actually now we're going to do the part 1 declaring variables. So in this case, you'll see this pattern in my markdown files. There'll be commits to include, so in your app.js, we'll just go ahead and grab this first one. And now I'll come over to my app.js. I will generally drop my other files because I probably won't need them. And then I'll put this in here. Now one thing I also like to do, and I think I probably should require this, but you'll see why. Console.log. Okay, and in this case I could just use a single quote, and we'll talk about that today, right? And I will use a semicolon, which we will also, and the reason I like this is that it will show up when I'm viewing the console. Okay, now let's go ahead and write some code, and then we'll come back and add some comments to it, because part of what we'll want you to do is write code, include comments to help you understand what that code does, and give you prompts to help you extend that knowledge. So we're going to use 2 ways of declaring and then assigning variables. Okay, so first we're going to say let score. Okay, so if we just did that, we just declared a variable, but if we do equals, we're assigning a value to it, and in this case 50. Okay, so a couple things here. We're using a let. You're going to see constant a minute, and we'll talk about the difference, but we've defined a variable name. Now these variable names I'll talk about as far as this naming standards, and I'll give you prompts to look at that. Okay, so then we could do console.log. Okay, and now in this case I'm going to do a backtick, and the reason I'm going to do a backtick is we're going to do, okay, initial INITIAL, all right, initial score using let. Okay, and then a colon, and this is all just content that's going to come out. And now here I'm actually going to do a $ curly braces and then score. Now the other way is kind of the old way of doing this, where you use regular single quote or double quotes, and then you use concatenation. I don't recommend it, so I don't even show it, but that is the other way you may see it. Okay, now that I've written a few lines of code, not all that I need so far, I'm going to go ahead, if I hadn't already, go ahead and start my live server. Okay, and now in here I'm in my private repo. I'm in my week 2. Okay, there we go, and I can see the title is, so I know I'm in the right one. I hit inspect. Cool. And now again, if you don't have your, as I showed in week 1, your console drawer down here, I recommend having it this way. That way you can always see, and I generally keep these because that way if I go to sources, I can see what I'm doing here. So this is really great because it walks you through your code, and you're going to hear me talk about using dev tools. Like if I wanted to hit a breakpoint, I could hit a click here on the other side of line 1. Okay, so this corresponds, of course, is the same thing as line 1 in my code. And if I hit refresh, because at this point when I'm viewing it without a breakpoint, file's already loaded. If I hit refresh, then the execution at this point stops in the JavaScript file. Okay, and now I'm actually going to step. Now I'm going to talk about in a little bit why that disappeared, but for now you might just notice that it did. Okay, so by first, if I hit step here, and by the way, you definitely want to learn how to use dev tools, and if you're having any problems, reach out for help. So then my JavaScript ran, that line ran, There was a comment. That comment doesn't come into the console, but now I have another comment, okay, declaring variables, and now I have this line, which, by the way, now there's nothing that came out because this line of JavaScript ran, executed. If I wanted to, I could type score here and I could see it, but now I'm going to do a console log which says output it, and then it shows me that initial score value, and there we go. And at this point, if I hit step again, because I'm all the way through my file, it actually drops into something that can be a little confusing because it's basically just what the live server injected. So you can either hit, a couple times through, let it continue. I'm never sure how many times I have to do it, but ultimately what I end up doing, if it doesn't immediately stop, I just go back here, because that stuff that comes in afterwards is just live server doing its thing, and I can either hit the play to play it all the way through. Okay, so again, we're going to learn this as we go through. That's just a quick overview. So now that we've set up this variable called score, we've assigned 50, the number 50 to it. We've console logged it using template strings. Okay, and I didn't even really say that clearly, but now I will, that we're using template strings on this console.log, and that console.log is a JavaScript built-in method that we get to use. All right, so now we'll say score. So now, because we're using the let, and this is what you're going to see me copy some content in a minute, we can actually now assign that variable to that same variable a new value. Okay, and then we can say console.log, okay, backticks here, updated score, right? And then we are going to use the template strings using this $ curly brackets now allow us to place into the output the score, it's the variable itself, okay, and again, semicolons. Okay, so let's just see this code run. At this point, because I have, and notice how here you don't see that code that I wrote, and that's because my breakpoint was stopping it. So I might just let it run here, and there we go. And then I can see, I may have to hit refresh because, yeah, now I got all the code that I wrote, and it's here, and I can see, yep, that worked. So let's talk about in terms of what we actually did here by adding some comments, okay? So I'm going to say up here, so before this code, we're going to say let use for values that can change. So you can see that we defined it. We said let score equal a value, and then we said, okay, now score equals to a different value. And let is the JavaScript keyword we would use for that. Okay, so and in this case, just understanding that we can reassign values. Okay, when we're using the let. Okay, so now we're going to write some more code, and this time we're going to use const. So const values, as you can already see here, right? The values should not change. So once we declare and assign those values, it should not change because they are consistent. They're const. Okay. So let's actually do that now. And so maybe this time we'll do it a little different. We'll come in here, and we'll actually add the comment first. And so now, and this is actually the way we're going to write this. So let's just write const, okay, and I'm making up these, right? So variable name here is game underscore title. And now in this case, when you see something like this, this is often termed a global, and all of these are actually global. We'll talk about scope as we get there, but when you see something capitalized, most programming languages, something that's used throughout the game, so, or in this case, throughout your code, right? So we might say, okay, this is equal to, right? Let's say my awesome game, okay? So once we do that, now let's do a console.log, right? Again, game title using const, okay? And inject that variable called, and notice how your editor will actually help you here by saying, oh, hey, is that, as soon as you start typing, because it has looked at your code and knows already you've set up that variable, okay? So if we flip over to our dev tools, we can see because we took off that breakpoint, we do have that output already coming through, and we can see, yep, that's it. Okay, but here's the thing you want to understand about this. Okay, and we're gonna create an error, but in the way of showing you, like if I was to say game title equal to another awesome, I don't know how to type today, game, right? So game title equal to another awesome game. Let's come over here. Oh yeah, see, look what happened here is that in the console we got an error. And it says assignment to a const variable. So that is telling us we're trying to then update that value that we assigned into the variable, but we can't do that because we defined it as a const. Okay? So we'd come over here, and I'm actually really surprised. I have to figure out, because normally I actually get a little error on here, and maybe I don't have one of my plugins installed, but an error meaning squiggly. So I'll probably find that and talk about it soon. Okay, so now what I want you to put, and this is not in there, is this. We're going to get rid of it. How are we going to get rid of it? We're going to get rid of it by commenting. So this 2 forward slashes is just a single line comment, and we're just going to say comment out above line to fix error. Okay. And why is that an error? Because we were trying to do something based on the way that we declared it. It does not work. Okay. So a couple things I want you to research here. Let's come back over here. Right? And I didn't really talk about them because I want to just mention them, and I want you to use, and I will have talked about this in attendance, I know I will, about, starting a thread in whatever LLM, chatbot, whatever you use to kind of keep track of some things I'm going to have you do here to get content. Like, what's the best practices for semicolons in JavaScript? Because they are optional. You don't have to include them. If I got rid of that in here, I wouldn't get an error, okay? Like if I just refresh it real quick, that still runs. It's just not the best practice because there are times you want to tell, because JavaScript will just inject them in a sense, right, without actually showing you they're there, but you want to be able to control when they're there, and there's ways you can automatically do it, but for a new coder, you want to just get that muscle memory of actually coding semicolons at the end of line, and that's something I do look for in your code as well. Okay, so that's just search that, get some information about that, right? So template strings, I kind of mentioned this, but template strings is what we were using versus what I didn't even show, which is string concatenation, but I want you to know it exists, and I want you to do a little research. So I would go research this concept using, again, whatever LLM you want. And then naming, so best practices for naming variables in JavaScript. Now notice on these, I'm not making you paste these into the JavaScript file. I really am just saying go research this. But by the way, best practices is generally camel case. So if I was to come up here, and you don't have to do this, but you could. If I was to say my score, I would then use camel case by using the first word would be lowercase, starting with a lowercase, and this is called camel case, right? So the idea of the camel, right? So the camel has a hump, starts low, has a hump, that's camel case. And that is generally accepted as far as the way we name them, right? And descriptive ones are and by the way, this would actually create an error right now, so you don't necessarily want to do it, and you could come over here and look. So this is going to create an error because that variable right here that I declared, when I'm trying to console log it, is going to say not defined. Okay, and that's good to know. All right, so but I'm just saying, learn more about, because we will talk about these topics as we move through about naming, best practice for naming variables in JavaScript. And then last one is something you will see in JavaScript. Sometimes people will use, like I use, now backticks are not this. Backticks actually allow you, is what template strings looks for to inject that variable name, but I could use single quotes here instead of doubles. The key is just be consistent. So whatever you're going to use, just be consistent with it. So again, notice that does not create an error. JavaScript does either single or double. Just be consistent to your code, so when somebody's reading your code, they will say, okay, yeah, this person consistently writes single quotes. And I will try to be consistent there. Most of the time, I generally like to do single quotes. I'm not even sure why. Okay, so now this is our first video done. So what we're going to do now is we're going to do your Git workflow, right? So in this case, right? So here's your Git workflow. I've turned it save your progress because you're not done. And remember, this is how I grade. I look at your code, I look at the commit messages to see if you have that. Now I'm not going to walk, actually let's do it for this one, and this will be the last one I'll show you. From here on out, you'll just know that's what you need to do. So I want to make sure git status, let's clear git status. Okay, so I do know my app.js changed here because I had already committed everything in that first commit that I did. So in this git add, now I could just do git add star because I have everything I need. I can get anything that I had changed, but in this case I know it was only one file. Okay, did I grab it? Yeah, declaring variables. Now in this case again, could I do git push? Absolutely, right? You could, just don't have to, because you're going to do a couple more of these videos. Okay, hope that helps you out, and I'll see you on the next one.